Radio. Listen to shows and read reviews online at WCBE.org.
I'm John DeSando,
And I'm Mary Urena.
and this is This Movie Time.
Yay!
Now,
Grab
Mary,
the popcorn.
I understand you weren't born in 1938. And
I was not.
to surprise,
Were you?
not surprised to you, I wasn't born either.
I'm shocked.
So what's happening in 1938?
1938 finds us in Munich, Germany, as the Allied powers are trying to avoid war with Nazi Germany.
Yeah, and the movie is called Munich, The Edge of War. Sounds like it to me.
It sounds like it to me as well, and it's based on the 2017 Robert Harris novel by
Okay.
the same name.
All right. Probably worked a little bit, massaged it a bit for Netflix.
I don't know. I didn't read the book. Did you?
No, but I've heard that it takes some liberties, which naturally it would, and it fictionalizes much of the action around the Munich Agreement.
Yes, through two specific characters. Hugh, the English diplomat or diplomatic assistant, I would say.
Yeah.
He's one of the secretaries to the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom.
Yeah, and he's played by George McKay, and some of you remember him running in 1917 and probably still running.
Yes.
I mean, so he's a handsome lad, very British, perfect for this movie.
Yes.
Tightened and
it starts out, we start out actually in 1932 where they introduce the main character both of Hugh and then also one of his best friends from Oxford, Paul von Hauptmann, who happens to be from Germany, along with Paul's girlfriend, Lena.
Yes, and I thought that Johannes Neumanner, who played
Your
Paul,
German is so good.
Thank you. Notice how quickly I try to get by that. And that's it. You would not let me. I knew you would. If you think I'm going to name the director, you're crazy. I'm going to wait for you to do that.
I think Christian is his first name.
Right. But this Paul, who is his buddy in Oxford, and then turns out to be a turncoat, German, and helping Paul trying to deal with this mess with Hitler. I think he does a sterling job on this, and I really almost felt bad for George McKay because Paul was so exciting as a character.
He was, and as I was watching the film, first of all, he's a very handsome young man.
Yeah.
And secondly, I couldn't quite place who does he remind me of. Like I was watching it, who does he remind me of? He looks like he could be the younger brother of Harry Connick Jr.
Oh, good, yeah.
I mean, that's the effect he has in terms of his look. He's actually a very established German actor. He's around 30 years old, appropriate age, appropriately cast.
Right.
All of them, I think, were appropriately cast age-wise, and has done mostly work in Germany. So it was really nice to see him in a film that's both an English and German production.
I think one of the strengths of this film is that we absolutely know the end game in all of this. We walk into that theater and we know, and this is always, I'm so interested to see how filmmakers can keep me for 2 hours sitting there engrossed in something where I know the ending. Do you have any feelings like that?
I did. You know, there's a pivotal scene with Hitler where Paul is alone in a room with Hitler, and you know that Hitler lives.
Yes.
But the tension actually I thought was very well played out because the fictional character of Paul and the fictional character of Hugh are in this scenario and you don't know what happens to them. And I think that's where the tension is held.
Great,
because we kind of know what happened to Hitler and we kind of know what happened to Neville Chamberlain, who is another pivotal character in this story, played fabulously, I thought, by Jeremy Irons.
Just enjoying himself.
Completely.
I mean, I cannot think of anybody now, of course, after I've seen it, who could have played Chamberlain better than Irons, and actually kind of resuscitated Chamberlain a bit in our memories.
For those of you who aren't steeped in the history of World War II or remember Neville Chamberlain, who his position of appeasement people felt was too soft in dealing with Hitler and didn't prevent the war and caused millions of people to suffer and die. But in this particular story, it's almost a what if. What if that tactic of appeasement
Good.
was truly to buy time for, as Jeremy Irons' character of Neville Chamberlain states, to prepare the people of Britain for war, both as people and their industry. So it was an interesting, for me, theory, which some historians actually feel may have been the case.
Mary, I'm convinced, that I really, because I have accepted the take on Chamberlain as being weak, just a decent guy.
Right,
Just-
and his arguments, even in his radio addresses at the time, were, we just came out of what was called the Great War, World War I, to us now, and people had suffered deeply,
Yes.
and there was not an appetite to go into war, and he sincerely, as it's portrayed in the film, really wanted to protect the people of Great Britain from having to go to war and suffer again
Yes.
in war.
And so as you look at it from a perspective of decades, you say to yourself, he bought them a year.
Yes.
Because there was, everybody says, well, how did you know Hitler was going to actually annex everything? You could tell. People like Paul knew that he was mad. And they knew that this was people knew this was just a strategy. Sign some agreement with Great Britain, they would never go to war. Who was kidding whom? Within a year, he broke that agreement.
Right.
And so, or giving the Sudetenland, which I can't believe they did, but imagine how pressed they were to give up that portion to
Well,
Hitler.
and we look at through the lens of history, and even then they bring up the strong issue several times that during this 4-day period, which is what the movie covers, the 4 days of the Munich conference and signing that agreement to give the Sudetenland from Czechoslovakia to Germany, they reference several times that representatives from the Czechoslovakian government were never there. They were never at the table. And so the leaders of Britain, France, Italy, and Germany were the ones who signed the agreement.
Sure.
And Czechoslovakia had nothing to do with it. So their country got carved up without
Yes.
any representation
Yes.
whatsoever.
Yeah, and it was predominantly German anyway, so there were some things going for it. But still, I guess it was what it presaged and what you could tell with Hitler. And we even have a fictional document here, right, which
Well,
describes
it proposes that it's fictional. If it really existed.
I know, right,
That's a little scary.
which was Hitler's game plan.
Right.
Yeah, I wanted to go back to Paul in that moment, which you took, that I was equally impressed with too. I really felt that the filmmakers had put us right there with Paul, and all of us wanting to assassinate Hitler.
Right.
All of us saying, would you, if you were there, would you have pulled that gun out and shot Hitler? I think a stronger argument that we would, not knowing what we know now. At that point, I just thought that was, as you said, just the tension was extraordinary.
The tension was really extraordinary.
Yeah.
And there was even the subtext of a member of the SS who's part of Hitler's personal security team now, who was a classmate, childhood mate,
Right.
soccer teammate or football teammate of Paul, who they run into each other and start crossing paths. And there's that tension of, this friend as well. And Paul, for me, was really the most interesting character because of his evolution from, this Oxford teammate or Oxford classmate, but he also, early on in the film, believes in Hitler. And,
Yes,
and as many Germans did, and why he was so successful was coming out of World War I, Germany was really made, impotent, if you will, as a country
Sure.
because of the war. And Germans were looked down upon, and so you had that whole subtext of then somebody coming into leader, and Paul makes this argument of, Germany is a great country, and we finally have a leader who's recognizing that and telling us that, and
Yes.
helping us get reestablished in the world, and there's nothing wrong with that. And there's a pivotal scene that is actually handled in a flashback, because when we joined the film the story in 1938, there's a rift between Hugh and Paul,
Yes.
the two main characters, and it's through a flashback that we learned that they had a huge argument about Paul's defense of Hitler.
Yes.
And the Nazi leadership of Germany, and obviously Hugh's character is against that, as is Paul's girlfriend Lena. And what makes, I think, the story really compelling from Paul's perspective is how he changes from being an advocate
Yes.
for Hitler and Nazism to wanting to betray that
Yes.
regime of the Third Reich in order to save the humanity of Germany.
Yes.
And it comes through a very personal way, which I won't reveal,
Mhm.
because I thought that part of the story was very touching and very moving.
And Mary, there are people out there crying for us to say more, but we can't. We don't have that much time, but we do have time on Back Talk. If they want to go to the podcast experience at WCB and listen to us talk even more,
Even
who could
more.
believe it? Even more.
Well, for such a pivotal event of, World War II was the pivotal event of the 20th century. And I
Yes.
think that's why through novels and films like this, we continue to revisit it and re-examine it. And I think this is a very good story, fictionalized story based on
Yes.
facts that really helps you look at history in